Hi everyone, welcome back to my solo sessions project. And for this solo session, I'd like to play you a piece of music that's been written by Brett Dean. Right at the beginning of the pandemic, Brett caught the coronavirus while he was travelling, and he spent the next months recuperating in Melbourne on his own. And during that time, he wrote this piece, and he's called it Bunker Music.
Hi, Brett. How are you?
Hi, Amy. I'm well, thanks. Yeah.
Good, good. And whereabouts are you at the moment?
So I'm in countryside England. I'm in West Berkshire, about an hour by train outside of London, a place that my wife Heather and I have recently moved to in the course of this very strange year.
Yes.
And it's a little village called Donington, and it's quite idyllic actually. It's sort of far removed, seemingly far removed from the concerns of the world, at least for the time being.
Well done.
It's a bit of a haven.
Yeah. Oh, good on you. And of course, this has been quite a year for you, and because for many reasons, but also because you actually had the virus. And I remember I did a concert with Lottie, your beautiful daughter, who's a singer, and that was at the very beginning of March. And a few days afterwards, she texted me to say, I just want to let you know that Dad is, he has the virus, but he's doing very well. And, we were so worried, but it was so lovely of her to let, all of your friends know, and we were so grateful. But, how that was probably nothing compared to what the concerns that they had and what you were going through. And do you want to just your experience to begin with?
Well, I mean, it was a very strange time. I won't bandy about with it. It was a very strange experience. It was also, though, now in retrospect, it was so much at the beginning of the whole drama, particularly in Australian terms. I was in Adelaide. I was there for the festival to do a concert with the Adelaide Symphony, which went ahead thanks very much to Richard Mills, who was prepared to jump in and conduct the concert on my behalf. So thanks again, Richard, if you're watching. I was whisked off by men in hazmat suits to the Royal Adelaide Hospital, and it was, very surreal. And I was in this isolation ward, and it was just, God, where am I? But I also have to say they were amazing, and already within a few days, I realised, I was in the best of hands and I was well on the way to recovery, but I just had to be there long enough to provide 2 consecutive negative results, which took its time, also because the labs were playing catch up in those early days. And then eventually made my way to Melbourne, where I then spent a good 6-7 weeks in recovery before I was able to then make it back here to the UK, where I'm now living. This is my base. So it was a very strange time. It was obviously, I think, probably more worrying for Lottie and for for my family, with the distance and so on, than it was for me myself. The first couple of nights were quite worrying because of the uncertainty of what it was, and this very clear sense that, not even the experts really knew what to make of this virus and how to treat it, and they were just going with what experiences they were hearing and reading about from Wuhan at that stage. And this is well before it became it was just the very week that it sort of engulfed the entire globe. And I was also, I think, probably an interesting demographic for the hospital, because I was, I'm in my late 50s, and I was probably in a higher risk category than many that they were dealing with. So it was a bizarre time.
Right. And so you spent a number of weeks in Melbourne, and I mean, that must have been quite an experience being all on your own. And I know that Håkan wrote to you because he was also having, you know, like all of us, I guess, wind players or, you know, any instrument that didn't have a lot of repertoire. We were all looking for, you know, new music to play. And anyway, do you want to tell us about that?
Yeah, so I got this, then must have been about just before Easter. And I was in Melbourne by then. I got an email from my dear friend Håkan Hardenberger, the wonderful trumpet player. And he was, you know, at home in Sweden, and all his gigs, like everybody else in this whole, in our whole world, everything vanished. And he wrote to me kind of slightly, you know, hangdog, he won't mind me saying that, I'm sure, slightly sad, kind of, all my friends that play the piano and play string instruments have Bach to play, and I don't have anything. Could you write me something that gives me something to get my teeth into? I think were sort of his words. And at first, I mean, one thing that the virus does sort of, one effect that it seems fairly across the board to be an effect that everyone talks of is just fatigue. I was just so exhausted. I was improving, but I was just really tired all the time. So my first initial thoughts were, I don't really want to do anything. But then I started playing around with some ideas, and in many ways it was this this challenge from Håkan that got me back to the writing desk. And whilst I was working on a big project that I'm still working on now, I put it aside and thought, yeah, I'll give this a go. This is a good challenge.
Great. And so you called it Bunker Music, which I think is one of the more brilliant titles of any piece ever. And and I suppose a couple of weeks, 3 weeks later, I wrote to you and kind of asked a similar question. And you very kindly said, well, I think I could probably adapt this piece for the saxophone. And so we've worked on it a little bit together. And
yeah, so I mean, it had a sort of link to the piece that I was working on, and as I said, am still working on, which is a big cantata type piece, a big piece for choral forces, 2 singing soloists and orchestra. And because the piece requires a large double chorus, I have no idea at this stage when it might be deemed performable or COVID compliant, because it really needs, you know, at least a chorus of over 100 for the sort of musical ideas that I've got for the piece, for them to make sense. But it was what I was working on, and because this year has, you know, been such a bizarre and unusual one, it's taken a lot longer to complete the piece, and I'm still sort of only halfway through the process now. But there was this passage in the piece that when I started thinking seriously about Håkan's challenge that he'd laid out to me, I felt there's something in this that really relates, first of all, to a wind instrument. It was a passage that I was setting for the soprano soloist. And this piece, I should point out, is an evolution. It's a piece about the history of the beginnings of the planet, really, and specifically looks at texts of Charles Darwin and on the origin of species in particular. But it does reference other, including the Bible, the book of Genesis, and also the Die Schöpfung, the creation, from a man called Van Swieten. And there's this moment that I had started setting for the soprano soloist, who is to be Siobhan Stagg, if the piece does get premiered next March in France, which is the plan at this stage. And there's this wonderful moment in Die Schöpfung where the text is, Doch war noch alles nicht vollbracht, doch war noch alles nicht vollbracht. But all the work was not complete. There wanted yet that wondrous being that grateful should God's power admire. And there was this moment then in the piece which goes through the stages of the Earth's, development, through the geological phases, through all the first biological emergence of biological life forms, and then this moment that from the Haydn is basically, we need that what is still missing is this creature that can actually articulate how marvelous God's work has been. Enter man, and in the context of also all that we've gone through this year in particular, this final section of this cantata is particularly telling for my librettist colleague Matthew Jocelyn and myself. He's compiled this marvelous text together, and so it really is this kind of significant turning point moment in the piece as we've shaped it, and obviously in Haydn's original creation as well. But in the context of the whole coronavirus story, the fact that something of man's dominance across the planet and the way we live our lives has obviously contributed to, its devastating effect. The fact that it can spread, a thing like this can spread so quickly nowadays is, thanks to the lives we live. And as musicians, we're part of that as well. We're kind of traveling salespeople, really. And sure enough, I was on a tour when I caught the virus. So, it's given all of us a lot to think about. And sitting then alone in lockdown in Melbourne, in what is, otherwise a place where our family has gathered and lived for many years, and then all of a sudden to be there very far removed from the rest of the family and all of these dear colleagues and friends, was a moment of real reflection. So that text also chimed in at this point and gave me something to think about. So that's how the piece started, was looking at some of the shapes that this soprano line had in itself. And it sort of took off from there. And actually then the process was quite rapid after that. It turns then into much faster music, which sort of looks at intervallic interrelations and also following on from Håkan's original email, it really gives him stuff to practice, which you've no doubt also noticed yourself. It's pretty tricky and it's knotty and it's sort of trying to work through complicated problems somehow. It sort of gets in your head, this, how do we move forward through all of this? And so then the title Bunker Music seemed like a no-brainer, but also this second, subtitle of music for instrument alone, very alone. And so it's been a thrill. Also, although it's been written originally for Håkan, it's actually, you and I have spent much more time working on the saxophone version, which has been a thrill for me too. It's been a lot of fun to get into the piece, and Zoom has shown its kind of limitations. It has to be said, and in a way, I'm so grateful for the limitations that Zoom has shown us all, because there's no real substitute for being there, is there? Ultimately, let's face it, we weren't really able to sort of in real time go through the piece successfully without some sort of internet glitch along the way. And in a way, thank God that that's still the case. You know what I mean? It's enabled all sorts of work from home scenarios, but I think in terms of music performance, wow. The people that I've been speaking to lately in the last few days, now that some concerts are starting to happen. I mean, even just the other night speaking with Piers Lane, and he said he saw a concert of the Doric Quartet, also dear friends of mine, playing a concert in Battersea, sort of outdoor concert. And he said as soon as they started this Haydn quartet, you know, everyone around him, himself included, had tears in their eyes just to hear a sound that was produced live and not online, and it was really there, and you could see the people playing and be part of that communion. Yeah, I think all sorts of, you know, there's going to be all sorts of experiences of the first time I heard such and such a piece after lockdown. You know, and the funny thing is, I've been thinking also the last few days, you know, in classical music, and I remember these sorts of conversations even when I was still a student, you know, that perhaps certain pieces need a moratorium. Maybe we should go a whole year without ever playing Beethoven 9. And this year of all years ends up being the year that nobody gets to play Beethoven 9. I mean, how bizarre is that? And you know, that given that there are still institutions and halls and viable going concerns across all arts genres, but, you know, thinking specifically of our own art form, given that it's still a viable going concern, there will be those moments where we'll think, God, this is the first time I've heard this in 3 years or whatever, you know, or longer in some cases. And, you know, maybe there's something about the overexposure to certain things that, you know, has been addressed. There's been a moratorium on every single piece, not only the overplayed ones.
Yeah, exactly. You're very, very right. Well, thank you so much, Brett. Thank you for sharing everything, and thank you for the amazing piece. It's been a real honor for me to be a part of it.
Oh, Amy, that's been my pleasure. Yeah, no, it's wonderful. I look forward to seeing I look forward most of all to seeing you play it live somewhere in a concert hall. But in the meantime, I look forward to your performance on the screen.
Thanks, Brett.
And thanks for all your help.
It's been a pleasure, real pleasure. Thank you. Take care.
Cheers. Bye. All the best.